The Clone Wars began with the Battle of Geonosis, a full-scale invasion of the heart of the Separatist war machine. Geonosis was the location of the CIS's primary droid factories, and by capturing it, the Jedi had hoped to prevent the massive droid army that the Geonosians had been building from waging war on the Republic. In that objective, they failed. Enough Separatist troop ships escaped Geonosis that the CIS droid army was able to immediately begin its campaign against the Republic. But the Jedi still captured Geonosis, which, for most of the war, remained firmly in Loyalist hands. The Geonosians' droid factories, which had been the droid army's primary production facilities up until that point, were all shut down. This begs the question, where did the Separatists actually move their primary factories to? What planet picked up the slack for Geonosis? In this video, we'll be answering that question.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The Confederacy's battle droids were designed and produced by Bactoid Combat Automata and Bactoid Armor Workshop, a pair of Geonosian companies that were subsidiaries of the Techno Union. These two companies were essentially different fronts for the same group. They shared a board of directors and tended to work together on contracts. Bactoid Armor Workshop, which specialized in tanks and other armored vehicles, was the public face of the company, while Bactoid Combat Automata was a secret subdivision that often skirted the boundaries of, or even outright violated Republic law, responsible for producing battle droids and small arms. Several months before the Battle of Naboo, both of these companies were contracted by the Trade Federation to build a massive droid army. Much of this army was produced on Mechworlds located in Republic space, where the Techno Union held great power. But this became a problem after the Trade Federation's new droid army failed in its invasion of Naboo. For obvious reasons, the Battle of Naboo led to considerable backlash and legal penalties for the Trade Federation, and though the company was able to avoid liquidation or prison sentences for its executives, it was forced to disarm by the Republic courts. As the Trade Federation droid army was dismantled, scrutiny quickly turned to the company that created it in the first place, Bactoid Armor Workshop. The Trade Federation tried to protect Bactoid from legal penalties, but since Bactoid's primary foundries were located within Republic space, it was unable to do so. The Republic imposed strict restrictions on the production of new battle droids after the Battle of Naboo, and Bactoid Armor Workshop was officially dissolved in a dramatic and heavily publicized fashion. Bactoid Combat Automata, however, was kept intact, and Bactoid Armor Workshop continued to exist in a reduced and secretive form through its sister company. Nonetheless, the dissolution of Bactoid Armor Workshop taught the executives at the Techno Union an important lesson. If they wanted to build another droid army, they couldn't do it within Republic space. Thus, the Techno Union reached out to the Geonosians, whose homeworld was located outside of Republic space. The Techno Union allied with Poggle the Lesser, Archduke of the Stalgasian Hive, and built several massive Bactoid Hive factories on Geonosis, which began churning out a new droid army far from the eyes of the Republic regulators. As this happened, the Techno Union began closing down Bactoid plants in Republic space, shuttering its droid factories on Foundry, Ord Cestus, Balmorra, Telti, and Ord Lythone, among others. This gave the galaxy the false impression that the Techno Union was scaling down battle droid production, when in fact, the opposite was true. In the years leading up to the Clone Wars, Bactoid began producing battle droids at remote droid factories scattered all over the Outer Rim, with Geonosis being by far their biggest producer. These factories churned out trillions of battle droids, which Bactoid sold to the Trade Federation, Intergalactic Banking Clan, Commerce Guild, and many other megacorporations. In 22 BBY, the leaders of these companies met with Count Dooku on Geonosis, where they agreed to pool their forces into a singular, massive CIS droid army. With it, they planned to invade the Republic on behalf of the Separatist movement. Of course, we all know how that ended up. Within just a few days of this agreement, Geonosis was under Republic control and the galaxy was at war. No longer having to hide its operations from the Republic, Bactoid ramped up droid production and began to operate more publicly, taking over factory worlds all over Separatist space. the CIS droid army grew rapidly, but early on, its growth was still hampered by the loss of Bactoid's primary facilities on Geonosis. No singular mech world filled this void, though the worlds of the Siskine system collectively came pretty close. Rather, Bactoid increased production across dozens of facilities to compensate for Geonosis, all while building more deep in Separatist space. Many of the Confederacy's primary factory worlds were well known in the Republic and had either seceded or been captured by the Confederacy during the war. These included Foundry and Ord Cestus, where recently shuttered Bactoid plants were reopened. Mechas 3, a volcanic world almost entirely given over to the production of droids, was also part of this group, as were Metalorn and Zagobar, both major Techno-Union strongholds. Balmorra, another of the galaxy's most infamous mech worlds, originally stayed with the Republic, but seceded when the Senate ordered them to shut down their droid factories entirely. But many of the Confederacy's most important mech worlds were new and obscure, having been built by Bactoid in remote systems during the Separatist crisis. The bulk of these worlds were located in two regions in the Outer Rim, a strip along the Polemian Run known as the Foundry of the Confederacy, and another swath of space near Geonosis on the Outer Corellian Run. Many of the worlds in the latter group also hosted Geonosian colonies, as was the case with Hypori, which practically became a second Geonosis in the early months of the war, and nearby Zorn. The worlds of the nearby Siskine system, Siskine, Olonet, and Kea, all hosted major droid factories as well, with Olonet's being the Confederacy's largest. Collectively, these separatist mech worlds produced massive numbers of battle droids over the course of the Clone Wars, making the CIS droid army the largest ground force ever amassed. But the Confederacy was still always looking to expand its droid production industry to new systems, and it frequently targeted loyalist mech worlds for this purpose. This was because, despite the many mech worlds controlled by the Confederacy, the Republic still had the advantage as far as industrial production was concerned. When the Republic finally began to fully militarize its industrial base in 20 BBY, this advantage meant that Republic forces quickly attained the upper hand in the Clone Wars. In 20 and 19 BBY especially, the Confederacy lost many of its mech worlds to advancing Republic armies. Ord Cestus, Metalorn, Balmorra, Foundry, and Mechas 3 were all captured by the Republic over the course of the war, greatly hampering Bactoid's ability to keep up battle droid production. In desperation, the Confederacy sought to make up for the loss of these mech worlds by converting captured loyalist worlds, or even some separatist worlds, by force. The Confederacy typically did this by implanting Geonosian colonies on target worlds. These Geonosians built hive factories, some of them automated and some run by slave labor. Some of these impromptu Geonosian colonies were set up on uninhabited worlds, as was the case with Zadja. Others, however, were established on planets with pre-existing civilizations, as was the case with the Ugnaught homeworld of Gentes. When General Grievous conquered Gentes in 20 BBY, the Geonosians enslaved the Ugnaughts and converted several of the planet's cities into droid factories, which were manned by Ugnaught slaves. The Techno-Union sometimes also employed this approach without importing Geonosian hives. On Nelvan, for example, the Techno-Union set up an experimental weapons lab without the knowledge or consent of the indigenous Nelvanians. When the Techno-Union's terraforming efforts earned the ire of the indigenous tribes, the researchers took to capturing the Nelvanian warriors that attacked them and using them in inhumane experiments. The Techno-Union began a similar process of destroying local cultures on Utapau, setting up an impromptu starfighter factory in Power City's Grand Hall and polluting the Utapauan sacred places with industrial runoff. Fortunately, the Techno-Union's factories on Utapau were short-lived. This pattern of industrializing captured worlds by force ultimately did nothing to save the CIS from the inevitable, as these impromptu mech worlds were unable to produce enough droids to make up for the loss of the Confederacy's primary industrial worlds. As the Outer Rim sieges progressed and Republic forces began to dismantle the foundry of the Confederacy, battle droid production rapidly declined, leading to an eventual Republic victory in the Clone Wars. So that was our look at the droid producers of the CIS. But what do you think? Would you like to see videos on any of these mech worlds in the future? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.